You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast, episode 196, my best guess. For this episode, we're joined by Conor Carmody. Conor is a highly experienced business executive, held a number of senior management positions all across telecom industry. Currently, the program director at the Innovation Exchange and the CCO of Airify. Don't know if I pronounced it wrong. Technology.
Airify.
Airify. Thank you very much, Conor. You're very welcome to the show.
Rian, thanks so much for having me on this morning and looking forward to a nice chat with you.
Likewise. Well, look, we'll jump straight in. As I said to you before I hit the record button, typically focus on kind of getting to understand and know who you are. I don't want to sound like a stalker here, but I usually try to start off with like pulling it right back to where someone grew up. And the only thing I could go off is your accent, which tells me that you're not from Kildare, because I see that you're on the board of a school in Kildare. So I'm assuming that you live in Kildare, but you're from Dublin.
You're a very good stalker, Rian. I'll give you that. Yeah, I grew up out in Stillorgan, actually. That was kind of home for probably the first 20 years, and then moved on into city centre. Lived there for a couple of years. Went to Russia. So I was in Penny's Primark when it was being set up as the office had moved back from the UK to Dublin, and we were setting up the office down at Mary Street. So went in there for a number of years, and was possibly the worst menswear buyer ever. And after that, I went to Russia. I lived over there for, I guess, the early 90s, after the fall of the wall, and we set up a business over there, and had a great number of years over there. And my wife was with me as well. So she was working in one business, I was working in another, and we stayed there until probably about 97, 98, I'm going to say, and came back then. And as we came back then, the family were starting. So we settled into Kildare out in a little village called Prosperous outside of Naas. And we've been here ever since, Rian.
I love it. Well, let's start with Stillorgan and then we'll move on to business. What was life like growing up in Stillorgan? Any kind of standout memories?
It was maybe I'm just an old guy, but it was a wonderful time. I had a great bunch of mates growing up out there. We're still pals to this day. We talk about the old times as old timers do, but we had great fun. Stillorgan back then was probably a smaller kind of outpost of Dublin city centre. So it was a small village. They were only starting on the building of the big industrial estate that's out there now. There was but it was a great village, full of great characters, enormous fun. So no, I'd have to say I really enjoyed it, and all the guys that I grew up with. As I said, we'd a wonderful friend group who were still all buddies to this day. There's guys that I know that I started in primary school with on my first day, and we're still buddies. 50 odd years later, we're still best of mates. So it was a great time, and actually in Stillorgan was a lovely place. It's grown up hugely since then, and when you look at all the development that's gone into it, but yeah, great fun out there, I'd have to say.
Brilliant. Well, before we move on from this, the transition to the next stage is people can usually point to 2 to 3 people perhaps that were in their immediate circle, family, friends, a teacher that had a massive impact on their early life that helped them become the person they are today. So does anybody spring to mind for you?
Do you know, it's a great question, actually. And I don't know about influences, but maybe influences were shaped in many different ways. But like, I went to a primary school, St. Lawrence's, across there, and it was amazing, and it was great. But there was a teacher at the time, Mr. Crow, because they were all Mr. They probably still are in school, Mr. Crow, and he was a wonderful guy, and I always recall, times could be, schoolmasters could be rough back in those days, and there was a bit of pushing and shoving and whatnot. He was a wonderful, amazing guy. He would give up so much of his time. He was mad about art, and he would take us into the art gallery in Dublin on a Saturday, give up his own time, take 5 or 6, 8 of us in, whoever wanted to go, and in we'd all go for a day out in town. And you kind of think, here's a guy giving up his time of a Saturday morning because of a love of art and a love of kind of teaching and imparting knowledge and all of that. And his family were deeply rooted in the community. His father was deeply rooted down in Kilmacud Crokes, as I recall. And they were good people, and you knew by them that they were good people. So if you push me, I'd kind of say, in the midst of kind of growing up in the rough and tumble of primary school back in the 70s, and then you this really gentle soul who spent a bit of time with us and brought us out to kind of widen your horizons, I guess. I just kind of think, isn't that an amazing feat for somebody to kind of find that time to kind of share that with a bunch of hooligans, really, it's kind of amazing, isn't it?
It certainly is. And Mr. Crow sounds like a good guy. A number of friends or acquaintances who are teachers, and they often don't get enough credit of the impact they can positively have on people.
I think it's amazing, Rian, you know, and my kids are growing up now. They've come out of the primary school system and they're just finishing, the last of them is just finishing the secondary school system. But I can look back, and they can, on a couple of teachers who, as you say, went out of the way. And teachers, I mean, you mentioned them on the board of the local school, so I see it in a hand, firsthand. But they have such a significant impact at a moment in time for a young child's life. And they're really good, and there's loads and loads of really good ones. And they put in that extra bit of effort, and they put in the bit of work, and they get to know the child, and they spend a bit of time with them. And you know, the arm around the shoulder, the kind of going over and above. And there was one teacher who stands out for me down in the school with my own kids, and she was just so lovely and did so much for our kids as they worked their way through. You kind of look at them and you go, yeah, it is a vocation, actually, in many respects, isn't it?
Yeah, you kind of got to love it as well, because you're never going to become a
Yeah.
millionaire from being a teacher.
No, absolutely. And you know, ours is a little village school where I live, and they're just wonderful folks. There's a lovely sense of community, and everybody's in it for that sense of community, for that sense of giving back. So it almost is. It's like our nursing profession. It is a vocation. You found something that you really love, and you're going to do it. You know, and you're not doing it to get rich, and you'll never get rich, and or anything like that. But you're doing it for a love of what you do, which is kind of really really nice, I think.
Shout out to the teachers. Well, look, let's not rewind the clock anymore. Let's speed it up a little bit and go to the time you spent at two roles. The first one I'm going to talk on here is Meteor Mobile. You spent 10
Yeah.
years there, so a full decade, so there's plenty of experience to pull on. What's perhaps a standout skill or behavior that you felt you left that role better at than when you went into the role that Meteor helped you improve on?
That is a super question. And when we think about the story of Meteor, which was a challenging story, so I was the first commercial guy into the business pretty much. So I set up the whole commercial organization. I was part of the very early stage team that went into that business. And it had an enormously challenging early stage period. So we got a license, and the license was revoked and challenged in court. We finally got the license after another year. There was two really strong competitors. There was what became O2 and what became Vodafone, two really strong, well-entrenched competitors. And we were this scrappy little startup, underfunded, struggling to kind of make its way in the world, real startup behavior. And we did it, and we built that company up to over 1 million subscribers, nearly $500 million in revenue, and sold it off to Eircom, which was quite amazing. And that was done through one of the things that Meteor did exceptionally well was culture. And you know, at the end of the day, there was probably 1,000 people working for us as we got to it. We had instilled a set of values at the very start when there was a small team of 30 or 40 people, and those values held firm as we grew. And we did hire people according to those values, and they were, as I recall, they were called the 5 Bs. You were be a good teammate, be positive, things like that. And that's actually how we lived our life. And I won't say grew up there, but I kind of learned so much there going in as a relatively young dude of kind of 29, 30 years of age, whatever I was when I went in, to a relatively senior role, and then coming out the other side as a more seasoned kind of professional. What did I learn? I learned the value of kind of values and instilling them. And I learned kind of about commercials and growing a kind of a almost $500 million organization. And the guy who was running it at the time, well, we had a number of chief executives, but one of them was a guy called Robert Holbrook, and I still work with him today. We do a lot together, and a really smart commercial guy who taught us, and this is going to sound funny, but he taught us how to invest money wisely. So Meteor grew up in a time of we'd no money to spend. We were waiting for investment. We were trying to grow commercial success. And I guess what he taught us was it was okay to invest some money in the right things because that would help grow your business. Really sharp commercial guy. He understood, and still understands the commercial levers of a business. And there were lots and lots of other people, but at his particular time, as the company went through explosive growth, it was around what are the key commercial levers that have to be pulled to kind of drive this organization forward. And he just got it spot on. So I would guess coming out of Meteor, there was a sense of, at the end of the day, it's just business. We all have family and friends, and we have, there are behaviors to be observed. And, this notion that business has to necessarily be cutthroat and you have to kind of jump all over everyone else. I don't subscribe to that. I think we're all humans. We've jobs, we've lives, we've got families, we've got everything else going around, and business forms an integral part of that, but it's not the only thing. So this idea of building a nice culture, making it a nice place to work while recognizing that people have other things going on in their life, and you've got to find that balance. That was hugely important and built in. And then I guess the other one was around a focus on the commercials, the numbers, and the rest will fall in behind. If you can prove that you can grow a business, you can sell, you can, bring in customers, lots of other stuff will fall into place behind, and you'll kind of figure that out. If you're figuring all of that other stuff out and you're not selling at the front end, it ain't going to work for you. So I guess they were probably two of the lessons that I took out of it.
Something stood out to me there when you were talking. You said, originally in this beginning, perhaps 30 to 40 people, and as you left, there was like potentially over 1,000 people there. There's a couple of studies that I've read that say like the lines of communication begin to like potentially break around 150 employees and beyond. So in one of your next roles, which was part of Vodafone, if I'm correct, marketing director, Vodafone Ireland.
Yeah.
What, like, was it an advantage to be part of a company that was such a small startup, 30, 40 people, that you worked through that communication break on 150 people and beyond, then going into Vodafone? Did that help in any way to be able to see how to relate to people? Like, you've got both the beauty of working at the startup, but then also, like, I'd consider it a large company once it's past 1,000 employees. So you're at the large company as well.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of answers inside in that, Rian. One is that Vodafone is an exceptionally well-run and structured company and part of a global group. And what they do it exceptionally well, and they've grown that business very well. So I guess they have figured out, not just in Ireland, but globally, those kind of structures and processes that work for them. I was only there for a short time. I'd like to think I had some little bit of impact, but in the broad or long arc of the Vodafone story, they have learned from many years. And, Vodafone Ireland was Aircell long before it was Vodafone. And so there was this kind of long growing period from it. Going back to your question around Meteor, we worked exceptionally hard, because I buy your argument that you get past 150 and then there's layers and there's senior teams and junior teams and middle managers, and all of a sudden you don't know anybody. We worked exceptionally hard to make sure that we kept the culture. So we did quarterly kind of all hands meetings, and we would literally book out a hotel room. We would all go in together, and everyone in that organization was very clear on what were the successes and the drivers of the business. And I remember standing up pitching, a particular product or a particular service, and being challenged from the floor by somebody, I would say, relatively new or junior to the organization, on the impact to EBITDA of this particular initiative. And you kind of think, we've done it. Like, if somebody is concerned, so all of our bonuses and all of our quarterlies were based around sales commissions, and they were based around kind of key drivers of the business, EBITDA being one, values being another. But if you can have somebody in an organization discussing, and you might call them relatively junior, but they might be newer, they might be and they're wondering about the impact to EBITDA of a particular initiative, you kind of think to yourself, Jesus, we've done it. So there was that side of it. There was we did have a lot of kind of social events. There was a social club, and then I recall I was running the retail organization, so we had 40 shops around the country. We had resellers, we had partners, and at least once a quarter we would go out and we would drive around the country for a couple of days and call into every shop and say hello to people. There was a conscious effort acknowledging your point that an organization grows, and the closeness that was there when you were living in a porta cabin with 10 other people and outside toilets and no running water and all this sort of stuff, which we did, by the way. We lived in porta cabins for the first year. There is most definitely a sense that we worked exceptionally hard to maintain that culture. And I know for a fact, because there's still kind of old Facebook groups or friend groups or WhatsApp groups, and we still talk about the glory days of what we built in Meteor and the culture. And people say, what an amazing, everyone was very young back then. They were all kind of just, a lot of them were starting their careers. A lot of them were just kind of, we went out to Kildare, we went out to City West. People thought we were mad going out to the country. It allowed us to get a whole bunch of folks who moved out and are still living around Naas or still living around Johnstown, who bought houses out there, worked in Meteor and had an amazing time. So there was, for a period in time, this amazing kind of culture that we worked very, it wasn't perfect. Nothing is perfect in life, but there was a lovely moment in time where we all pulled together to build something really good.
I'm 29, so call me part of the Meteor generation. And you weren't cool if you didn't have an 085 number back in the day.
Well, you think about it, Rian, we introduced free text and free talk. And the
Yeah.
reason we did that, and it was only online, it was Meteor only online. The reason we did that, we had a network that was empty and it didn't cost us that much to give away Meteor to Meteor calls and Meteor to Meteor text. And from that, we built a tribe who just joined us. And, you know, you topped up by 20 euros. So we got 20 euro out of you or 10 euro out of you up front. We stuck that in the bank and then you just worked away for the month. But we had your cash up front. And on that one initiative, I think Meteor turned and prospered and grew. That was kind of, you look at kind of key things like that. And I know our competitors looked at it and said, how can they do this? This can't be done. Well, it could be done, and we proved it, and then they all followed us. So that was kind of those sort of things that you talk about there, those free talk and text and kind of quirky ads that we were running for a good number of years back then. So I guess the lessons are you can grow a company, you can grow it big, you can maintain a culture, you can be a scrappy competitor, and you can maintain that scrappiness even as you grow up, and you can, you know, maintain that competitive focus on results culture, while at the same time, very importantly, having a bit of fun along the way.
That's important. Some people might call Meteor the original WhatsApp then. Um,
I wish we thought of that back then.
so you've touched on culture a lot over the last, let's say, 10 minutes. So park that aside for 2 seconds, and I'm not disregarding the importance of it, but as part of a startup myself, and you've had a fantastic career both in your current role. I see Innovation Exchange branding behind you. What's when someone's building a startup, so like pre-seed, what's one or two blind spots that perhaps could hold them back that they're not aware of? Not having a good hiring process, learned helplessness in the company, wanting to hold on to everything. What's one or two that stand out to you that go, I see that. You're like, that needs to change.
So I guess I'll step aside from culture for the moment, but, and
Yeah.
I'm like you, I'm kind of, we've a new business that we're setting up on the side, and we're funding for it, and it's kind of a challenging ride, but that's kind of the nature of the beast, as you know. For me, it's around I think the one that always will is, do customers want what you have? So leave culture aside for a moment, and you do need to talk about the hiring process, and you need to talk about that. But if you're building a product and you're happily building away by yourself without actually figuring out that anyone in the market wants what you have, that's probably why startups, not all, in all cases, there's lots and lots of different reasons. There's timing, there's fit, there's pricing, there's market opportunity, there's access to funding. Right now in the market, you know, VC money is drying up. We're in a very tight period at the moment. The UK is not quite in recession, but it's slowed down, which is our next biggest market. So there's a general sense of tightness around the place. People running out of cash, VCs holding back money, and all of that. So, but the one thing, I think it was Eric Schmidt at Google said, is that revenue solves all known problems, in jest. But if you can go out and prove that customers will take what you have, that's the kind of the focus should be. And I talked about the importance of sales back in the Meteor day and everything that we do, but the importance of selling, getting customers and validating what it is you're trying to do is the number one lesson. And everyone in your organization, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 5 of you, everyone at the startup stage should be focused on, how can we get this in front of customers? How can we sign up customers? And how can we get them to validate it? Because VCs want that as proof. Banks want it as proof. Your staff want it as proof. People outside want it. But that notion of, and you know, there's a certain, going to the Innovation Exchange for a moment, and we'll talk about it, but what we do is kind of put SMEs in front of corporates and get them to pitch. And I'm often amazed at, it's almost a reticence of SMEs to do a very strong pitch to a corporate. And it's almost this, well, I'm not sure they'll take what I have. Well, there's only one way to find out, and that's leap down their throat and give it to them and see what happens. And the worst that can happen is somebody says no to you. So if you're asking me for the startup, what's the there's a lovely TED talk actually by a fellow called Bill Gross, Gross, and he talks about the 5 reasons startups succeed or fail. It's kind of really interesting. It's from a couple of years ago, but the lessons are still valid. And he says for him, the number one determinant is timing. And by timing, he means that you go to the market and the market doesn't want what you have. You may be too early or you may be too late. And I guess it ties back to that sales piece, that you very quickly get into the market, you talk to customers, and you see who wants what it is that you have, and that's kind of you're going to be your key driver.
So the innovation exchange, the logo's been on the background for anyone who's watching the video. For not, the logo's in the background. You'll do a much better job at the 30-second commercial than I will. So the microphone is yours.
Yeah, so I guess it's founded on one or two key principles, Rian. The first one is that digital transformation and the requirement for digital transformation is an imperative for this country, for businesses in this country. It's an imperative at a European level, and the need for continuous innovation is actually hugely important for all businesses. I mean, we look back over the years and we remember some of the companies that were chart toppers and then have vanished. Blockbuster, Nokia, from my industry. They were the kings of the castle, undisputed, and within 10 years they were gone. And what happened? They just failed to innovate, or they didn't see the world changing around them. So for businesses, every business needs to be very aware of the fact that the world is changing, and arguably in the next 10 years, that rate of change is going to increase. So the notion of innovation and continuous innovation for companies large and small is hugely important. So for us, that's the first principle. And the second one is, we did a huge amount of research on the Innovation Exchange before we set it up. And we figured out that corporates, large corporates, they want to buy from Irish SMEs and claim that they can't find them. And on the other hand, Irish SMEs want to sell to corporates and they can't get in the front door. So they can't get by the gatekeeper and they can't kind of find the relevant person with the budget or the need or whatever. And it seemed to us that there was a gap for a dating agency at its simplest form. And so what we do is we find, on the one hand, corporates, and on the other hand, we find SMEs, and we put them together in a very curated fashion, and we get them to try and buy and sell to each other. And over the last year, we've onboarded 25 or so corporates. So we have Glanbia, Musgrave, AXA, Ryanair. We've a list of companies that have joined us, and they come to us with particular challenges that they're trying to solve. And then what we do is, on the other hand, we've onboarded about 250 SMEs. There's probably more coming through every day. And we have a curated process where we put them together. So give you a really live example of how it works. Yesterday, we had a challenge from Ryanair. So we call them the challenge, where the corporate comes on, does a webinar with me, and they position their challenge and they talk about what are the things that they're trying to fix. And we have 50 to 60 SMEs on that webinar, and they get to challenge, discuss, do some sales discovery with the corporate, and they get to ask them questions to rule themselves in or out. And following that, they send us a submission. We take that submission to the corporate and we work with them to see, would you really buy from one of these guys or not? And then we kind of get into that back and forward of the sales process and the pipeline. So yesterday, Ryanair come on and they talked about efficiencies at the back end is kind of one key area that they had. They did mention a second one, which was around their ESG kind of sustainability agenda and how they were looking for new areas that they could develop. So we had John Hurley, who's the kind of CTO, and then we'd Colin O'Brien, who's head of kind of quality and innovation. They're two very senior guys, and they came to us for an hour. They talked about how they buy. They talked about what they will buy and what they won't buy. They talked about their decision-making process, and they talked about how to get their attention. So we had two of the most senior guys in one of Ireland's Europe's biggest companies, and they're telling you what it is they want to buy, what they can't fix themselves, and how you should approach them. I mean, it's kind of gold dust when you think about it like that. So those 50 or 60 guys, companies on the call, they will reflect on what they heard yesterday, and then they'll send us a submission. That submission is 1 page, half a page, no more. And we will curate that. we'll put them in front of Ryan or in front of John and Colin. We'll go and meet John and Colin. We'll ask them to kind of give us feedback, good, bad, and ugly. We'll then get the companies that they like, and they'll pick 4 or 5 companies that they want to kind of really deeply engage with, and we'll get into a kind of a good buying process. And we've repeated that 20 times last year. We'll repeat it 50 times this year. And all we're doing is building a sales pipeline for Irish SMEs, and we're getting them in front of key decision makers who will buy.
Phenomenal. I imagine there has to be a lot of trust in innovation exchange from both parties. I've seen it from the smaller trying to get into the bigger with some people find it difficult, perhaps because a big corporate doesn't know too much about the small SME, or the small SME doesn't have enough bandwidth to be able to carry the weight of the whole project. But from the large corporate wanting to partner with a small SME and not being able to find them, that's something that I just haven't even lived that world, so I don't know. Like, what were some of the reasons as to why the large corporates weren't able to find, or I don't even know if find is the right word, the SMEs to partner with? Because what you're saying essentially, it's Tinder for SMEs and corporates, which is fantastic in itself. And I imagine that there's a lot of trust put in you with the likes of John from Ryanair going, well, if Conor gives it a nod of approval here, and he's going to do a lot of the heavy lifting and work for us, your reputation's on the line at all times.
So there's a couple of points inside that, and you're bang on. Firstly, is around the trust piece. So yeah, we're a trusted organization. So Skillnet are funding this, and we're managing it through further previously Dublin BIC. So we've been around the block for a long time. I've been around the block. So it comes as a kind of a trusted organization. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing, why can't corporates find Irish SMEs? Well, if you think about a large corporate, they're kind of busy folks, and he or she has a full agenda. They probably have a 2-year product development roadmap that's already mapped out. And to break into that cycle, they have some trusted vendors. How would they find the time to go out and scour an SME landscape? They just don't do it, and they can't do it. So we do that for them. Yeah. And what are they looking to buy? They're looking to buy novel solutions. Think about large corporates. Everything is kind of mapped onto a 12, 18, 24-month product development cycle. And the world is moving a lot faster than that. So what they're asking us to do is help them speed up their NPD. They're asking us to say, you must be able to find these guys who have innovative technologies, who can move much more quickly and in an agile fashion than we can, and can plug into our existing systems. And so that's what we do. You mentioned briefly about the type of company. So this is probably not for the pre-seed startup company, because you're a one-person band and she is kind of by herself and you're then put in front of Glanbia or AXA. You're probably not going to make it. So this typical company has, I guess, a team of 4 or 5 people. So there's some capacity in there, and there's a capability to grow. The company SME type has already existing revenue and customers. So you're not pitching into the corporate to say, you'll be my first customer. They won't take that. So they're looking for some proof points, and they will say to you, have you got a reference site, or have you got a customer, or have you got whatever? So our ideal customer probably has a couple of staff already, has a product that's built and deployed, and is now ready to start thinking about scaling up. And the corporates and how corporates buy is quite clear. They're not going to hand you over a multi-million-dollar contract on the first day you meet them. They tend to say, and we've seen this, they tend to say, let's do a proof of concept with you. Let's get you in, get you working with us. See, do we like you? Do you like us? And that might have a value of 50K or 100K, as we've seen. And from that, if you deliver on that, the world is your oyster then to land and expand after that. And just in terms of what we did last year, we got to about 5 deals done, and they're all proof of concept, engagement, money being paid, and we have a pipeline rolling over into this year of about 20 deals that are underway, and we'll continue to build on that. So some of one deal happened with the corporate in about 8 to 12 weeks. Others are kind of taking bit longer than that, maybe 3 to 6 months to work through. And we'd expect that. So I kind of think this year's a big year for us. A lot of those deals that were flowing through from last year will start to land into this year.
8 to 12 weeks is phenomenal, because I imagine the likes of John on Twitter is probably, it is 2023, but he's probably living at the like Q4 of 2024.
Yeah. So this was a particular deal. They had a particular need, and it was pressing and urgent. And we kind of found them the right person, found them the right company who were a super company, and we managed to get it done. And it was a proof of concept. They've extended that, and my understanding is they're now talking about a full kind of rollout of a contract. So, if the need is there, the corporate will move fast. If you're kind of talking about going into, I don't know, a big bank, and you want to replace the core. Most of them use an IBM AS kind of 400, I think it's called, or something. If you're talking about going in and replacing a massive piece of on-premise and changing that out, well, that's a multi-year job. If you're talking about going in and saying, we've spotted a gap of something that you can fix, we are cloud-based, we'll plug it into your existing system and we'll crack on, that can happen quicker. Yeah. I think the piece that we're still cultivating is the corporate mindset, such that they're happy to do these proof of concepts. They can see the proof points coming through, and from that you build. So that's kind of where our focus is on, is getting a lot of these POCs underway.
2 final questions for you, and I'll link Innovation Exchange website in the description where you're listening or watching this, and I'll also link Conor's LinkedIn as well. But the 2 final questions are the importance of building your network. When I was doing research, either Google or LinkedIn, you're a popular man on Google, and on LinkedIn we've got a number of mutual connections. How important is it to continue to build your network as you grow in your career?
So I think it's, look, the answer is it's hugely important, but let me nuance that. I think as you're working through your career and you're building up, you come across lots and lots of folk. So LinkedIn, I have thousands, I don't even know what I have there, but there are people, lots of randomers come in, and if I can help them, I will, or if they can help me, they will. But there's a core group inside that of people that I've worked with over the years, that I've stayed in touch with, that I trust, they trust me, I think. And we continue to kind of look for shared business opportunities. And I think that's hugely important. So, if you're thinking of, as you work through life, you come across people that are good at what they do, that have credibility, are probably aligned with what you're trying to do in life, and they are too. I would hold on to those sort of folks dearly. You mightn't talk to them for a couple of years, but at some point you're going to go back, or they're going to come back and say, hey, I'm working on this. I'd like you to help me, or you help me, whatever like that. And even in the Innovation Exchange, there's a couple of folks that I've worked with over the last 20 to 30 years. They're really good at what they do, and they've offered to come on board and help us out with what we're trying to build here. And I would gladly take that up. I mightn't have seen them in 10 years, but I know their credentials, I know who they are and what they do, and I know they're self-starters that will hit the ground. So I guess there's a notion of a network in its wider context where, as you say, you and I probably have lots of shared connections and people that we know and we've all kind of touched along the way. And then there's a kind of a closer group underneath that, which is those folks that I'm kind of deeply connected with. And they would be back to me. By deeply connected, I mean, I know them, I know their credentials, I know what they do. If I could put something their way, or they can put something my way, that's how we'll operate. So hugely important. And finding, what the thing about a network is, you're going to be building a career that's going to last you, 30 or 40 years. Isn't it great to work with people that you like and you trust and that you enjoy working with? It makes it so much easier.
100%. Final question for you. If you were Minister for Education and you could add one mandatory subject to the, let's say, Leaving Cert curriculum, what would it be and why?
Jesus. That's a tough one now. What would I add to the
Leaving? Complete pivot, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's a subject.
Yep.
But a topic that's close to my heart, and I'm sure there is a subject somewhere, somebody, maybe it's philosophy or something, but curiosity and the world around us is just like, we have in our phones the entire sum of human knowledge available to us. And we spend our time looking at cats and memes of cats on Reddit. And you just kind of think to yourself, like, there's so much happening in the world around us. There's so much interesting things happen. There's so many interesting people giving of their time free. I would have kind of thought, how would you engender in children in school this wonder and curiosity of the world around us, and how would you get them to kind of explore and to think and to read and to kind of, you know, take your head up and look around the world. And actually, for all of us, even in business, like finding the time just to stop for a moment and kind of think and do a bit of research and look at the world around you, and not for any particular reason other than there's a huge body of knowledge out there that's all kind of hugely fascinating and interesting, and, you know, finding the time to do that. So yeah, if there was a time to find for kids in school to engender in them, and going back to Mr. Crow, my old teacher from second class, and him saying, just come to the art gallery and just sit there and look at paintings. And I know you're only, whatever I was, 8 or 9 years of age, but come and look, and kind of, I can still smell the art gallery. I can still smell Saturday mornings in there and looking at pictures and having him explain this and explain that. And you kind of think, isn't that amazing? So if we could get our kids to consider the world around them as they grow up, I think that would be hugely important.
I love it. Conor Carmody, it's been a pleasure spending the last 35, 36 minutes with you. I wish you and the Innovation Exchange continued success. But for today, we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Reen. Thanks for having me, and look forward to catching up soon.